Hello, this is a video about post-diagnosis grief. That's not to say I'm sad about being autistic. I'm sad about the 4 decades I lost to feeling constantly confused and like a bad version of a normal person. And if my post-diagnosis grief was as simple as that, I'd say, thank you for listening and take care. But like autism and life, my feelings are a little bit more complicated than that. Pete Warmby is also a late-diagnosed autistic adult. As I've mentioned in a previous video, he's written a great book called Untypical, which is about autism and his autistic experiences. He recently shared this funny yet tragic meme. Well, Mr. Warmby, I can confirm you are autistic. Oh right, now what? Well, your whole sense of who you are and your perception of your life to date is in tatters. So here's a leaflet. Is that it? Yeah, bye. I said my feelings about my late autism diagnosis are complicated, though if I was to sum them up, I'd refer to that meme. My late diagnosis has fundamentally changed my perception of who I am. My life is now divided into 2 chapters: pre-diagnosed me and the Chamber of Doubts, and post-diagnosed me and the I can't be bothered to think of a parody title because I'm too busy wondering what life might have been like if I had known much sooner that I'm autistic. I think there are plenty of people who think a late autism diagnosis or realization goes something like this. Oh, woe, I am cursed with a defective inferior brain. No one must know my shame. Please pity me. However, as the other meme I've just pinched from says, the reality is more like this. So there's a reason I'm this way, and there are other people out there who are like me. This is great. No more forcing myself to act normal, even in the privacy of my own home. No more guilt over being a weirdo. To celebrate, I'm going to wrap myself in 6 blankets, crawl under the table, and make cat noises for an hour. I prefer to make silly YouTube videos than make cat noises, though you get the point. It's like Einstein said, everybody's a genius. But if you judge an autistic person by their ability to navigate a nonsensical world in which images and hierarchies are valued more than reality and compassion, they will live their whole life believing they're stupid. I mean, imagine if I judged my cat Pepsi on her ability to make dinner. How would that make her feel? I'll tell you, she would be utterly indifferent because she's a cat and she can't read my mind. And even if she could, she wouldn't care, because she's a cat. Anyway, for 40 years I tried to be normal, and I felt bad for not being normal, despite trying so hard. Side note, what is normal? Autistic Jenny recently did a great video in response to this question. See the link to Jenny's video in the video description below. For 40 years I felt guilty and confused because everyone else seemed to be managing without even trying. So I grieve for those many years in which I felt like an outcast, and here's the metaphorical punch in the stomach. That torment was avoidable. If I had known I'm autistic, I wouldn't have tried to be someone I'm not, and I would have spent more time and energy being who I am. Except, as someone recently said in a National Autistic Society forum, I don't really know who I truly am, and that is the hardest thing. Can you understand why that would make someone grieve? The following comments are from a late-diagnosed 20-year-old autistic person. Even though I got to the diagnosis, I thought that would be all the validation that was needed, like a nice little summary of my personality and all the issues I was experiencing. Nobody warns you for the grief you experience, or the imposter syndrome. I'm having to process a lot of situations in which I was taken advantage of, situations that I misjudged, believing people had nice intentions. I was suffering when it wasn't my fault, was continuously gaslit by medical professionals, socially, physically, in relationships feeling out of place and not being able to cope. If only I had known the whole time, I would not have suffered the way I did. I feel like I wasted opportunities and did not get the help I needed. I completely identify with this. For an example of being taken advantage of and gaslit, have a look at my family misfortunes video. As I said, the person who wrote the comments I've just quoted was 20 years old when they wrote them. I was double their age when I found out that I'm autistic. Some people find out that they're autistic in their 60s or 70s. There's probably someone in the world who's 100 years old who's just been diagnosed, though probably because autism assessment waiting times are so long. A late autism diagnosis is sort of a rebirth, but it's also a mourning for the death of time. Years that could have been different if you'd had that knowledge about yourself. It's a very cruel trick for an autistic person to go so long without knowing their own brain, when their own brain typically craves knowledge. Talking of knowledge, please excuse me while I go off on a tenuous and indulgent tangent. Jacques Derrida coined the term hauntology in 1993 to describe the notion that Marxism continues to haunt Western society despite the apparently conclusive victory of capitalism over communism. The word hauntology itself is an example of the wider concept of hauntology, which is about things that are present and not present. Ontology is the philosophical study of being, i.e. the nature of existence. In French, the word for hauntology is ontologie, so the H exists in the spelling, but not in the pronunciation. It's both there and not there. For 40 years, my autism was there and not there. Yes, you heard me. I'm saying that my autism is hauntological. If you think that's pretentious, try reading some Derrida. I've read a little bit, but it was hard because some of the meaning was missing, despite Derrida insisting it was there. My original reason for wanting to link hauntology with late-diagnosed autism was Mark Fisher's work on hauntology. In his book, Ghosts of My Life, he demands that we should be haunted by the not yet of the futures that popular modernism trained us to expect, and that these unrealised futures should reproach the formal nostalgia of the capitalist realist world. By not being diagnosed as autistic much sooner in life, I can only feel nostalgic for a life I never had. Just like Mark Fisher and many others have pined after a world that seems impossible to exist. Jodie Hare is a writer based in the UK. Her book, Autism is Not a Disease, The Politics of Neurodiversity, has just been published. She was herself diagnosed as autistic at the age of 23. In an online article, she quotes this Instagram post. "The saddest part of receiving our autism diagnosis as adults is that many of us grew up thinking there was something wrong with us, and that kind of self-hate might have left emotional wounds that we are still trying to heal." She then writes, "For me, this statement rings true. I am not grieving because I want to be somebody else, or even just somebody neurotypical. I am grieving for the version of myself where I never doubted for a second that I deserve happiness and love, that I am valid and worthy, if only for the simple fact that I exist." Can we all just take a moment to appreciate how powerful and beautiful those words are? I deserve happiness and love, if only for the simple fact that I exist. In an interview I recently did with another late-diagnosed autistic chap called Orion Kelly, I said that I felt grief about the lateness of my diagnosis. In response, someone wrote this. He calls it grief. I call it agonising resentment. I think whoever wrote this is absolutely right. I feel like I missed out on so much, and I'm angry about that as well as sad. However, I repeat, I am not sad about being autistic. If you are sad about being autistic, that's fine. Or rather not fine. I'd rather you weren't feeling sad about being autistic. This is only my own autistic perspective, after all. That said, I want to end with someone else's autistic perspective. Here's Jodie Hare again, with words that fill me with agonising resentment because they're far more eloquent than anything that I could ever write. Autism is part of who I am. It is the thing that provides the passion for my endless interests, ensuring that I'm never bored or devoid of things to care about, and most of all, it guarantees the intensity of the love I hold for people, topics, places, and anything else that hooks me. For this capacity for love, this endlessly renewable source of attention and adoration, I wouldn't rid myself of all the grief in the world. Thank you for listening, and take care.